Thank you for joining us on the RTO Superhero Podcast. Elevate your organization's potential by becoming a part of our superhero membership community. Gain exclusive access to resources, training, and support, all tailored for RTO professionals. Visit our website to join and start your journey towards compliance excellence today.
Welcome, superheroes, to another episode of the RTO Superhero Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Connell-Richards, and today we're diving into the hot off the press revised standards for RTOs, which were released on Friday, the 14th of March. And joining me is the amazing co-host, Lauren Boon-Hollows, an expert in RTO compliance and advocate for quality training outcomes. Together, we're breaking down the changes and what's going to be the impact on RTOs and why these changes matter and what they mean to you as an RTO owner, manager, compliance officer. Lauren, welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's always awesome having you here, Lauren. I love having our chats, and particularly because we just love compliance so much. We're crazy, but anyway. Okay, so what were your initial thoughts when the standards dropped on Friday?
Well, the first thing was, okay, cool, great. They're actually finally out. We know that from 1/7/25, we're going to have to be meeting this new standard, which was really, really good. And what I will say is I do like the structure of having the outcome standards sitting above it and then having the performance indicators sitting below it. I know that Asquith was working with the legal team on refining the instrument for quite a long time. And I think that particular structure, and they have, you can see work that's been done in order to try and make those performance indicators clearer for RTOs so that they do have something, very clear to work to. And certainly I think that particular structure is a lot better than just having these outcome standards, which were definitely a lot more they were just far more open to interpretation. So I think that, you're never going to get anything perfect, but given all the work that's been put in, I'm relatively happy with where we've kind of arrived at. I think that most of this stuff is very workable for RTOs.
Well, they've done a lot of consultation. So I don't think I've ever seen so much consultation on legislation for the training sector.
Yeah. But it does have such a huge impact as well. And obviously Asquith is as impacted by it by the RTOs who are being regulated by it. So I think that, as I said, I think what they've come to and that structure that they've come to is a lot more workable than what we were initially presented with 2 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. So there's been a lot of to and fro, and I'm glad that they've taken on board a lot of the feedback that was received into the incorporation. Were there any major surprises, or do these align with what you were expecting from the draft standards?
I mean, look, as I think we've spoken about before, you and I have both been rewriting all of our policies and procedures, understanding that this is kind of what we were going to have to be working with. I don't see any major changes in that. I think some of the definitions that have come out have been really good. It's nice to see that. I was really happy with, for example, 1.3. I just thought the way that they put the performance indicators on 1.3 with very clearly stating assessment tools are reviewed prior to use to ensure assessment can be conducted in a way that's consistent with the principles of assessment rules of evidence. I was like, there's just no question now, right? We're not going to give some vague definition of validation, pre-validation, moderation, something that's just been argued so much.
Round and around.
It just made it very, very clear that, with 1.3, yes, you're going to have to check that your tools are going to be fully compliant. So there's no excuse for, oh, well, I bought them and I was given a guarantee that they were compliant. No, you actually have a responsibility to make sure that that's definitely going to be the case. And then after you deliver the training, you've got an obligation to make sure that the assessment practices and judgments right? And that word, having that word in 1.5, that you're checking the judgments that have been made, it just removes all of that lack of clarity of like before and after. So that definitely does have to be done. My interpretation of that is basically you have to review every single assessment tool and validate every single assessment tool prior to using it. And I mean, like on a practical level, why would you not? Like, why would you deliver an assessment tool that
you've never looked at, never used? Yeah.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I think that it's going to be, you know, some of those sorts of things for some RTOs is going to be really problematic. And they're going to be going, oh, well, we've got, you know, 32 qualifications on scope and we've got over 1,000 assessment tools and we've only ever bought them from providers and we've never actually checked them ourselves. Well, that's just not okay.
One of the things that I recommend is, and when I was reading into the draft standards, I thought this would be the best method, would be trainers actually complete the assessment tools so that they can see what it's like, what the process is like, and then they can get a better understanding. Then we can go to validate. Because if you've just bought assessment tools, reviewed them, I think as a trainer assessor, the best way you're going to learn is by completing the assessment yourself and then do validation after that where you can find out where those gaps are. I know as a trainer and assessor myself, I learned a lot by just using the assessment tools when I was delivering training, and I like one of my favorite sayings is teach to learn. I learned so much when I was teaching. Yeah.
Part of that as well is just that you know, now what we're seeing, what I'm seeing a lot of is that RTOs are then looking to take these tools and put them into student management systems. And so, you know, that process of putting them into the student management system and thinking about what you want the students to be presented with, how they're going to engage in things. I was doing a validation of some training materials from another provider last week. And, you know, they kind of just copy and pasted them into the system. And I was like, guys, I said, with these observations, like with the practical tasks, I said, is a trainer in the classroom observing them? Is the student supposed to upload them, do them in their own time? And they were like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, there's no instruction. Like there's no instruction in there as to like how this practical assessment is actually going to take place, whether you're going to record it, whether or not it's supposed to be done in the workplace, whether or not it's going to be done in simulation. Like it just says you need to do this, but it doesn't say how you need to do it. And they were like, oh. And I was like, okay, so like part of this, you know, so part of the upload process, you know, includes that as well. And I know that there are other tools out there that you can buy where they've kind of tried to give both options of like, well, here's how you're going to deliver it if you're delivering it in simulation, and here's all of the simulated business that comes with it. And here's how you would deliver it in the workplace. And it's all built into the one tool. So the one tool is huge. It's, you know, like, it's like 100 pages because.
But it can be adjusted to the different.
Well, I mean, the RTO is meant to like review it and then pull out one of those parts, right? They've chucked it all in together. And then I'm looking at it, I'm going, you've got a 3% completion rate on your assessment tools based on what your student management system's telling me. That's because you've just chucked everything up there. Like there's clearly been no review of this tool whatsoever prior to implementing it. So I think a lot of
the big part is the usability of it. Yeah.
It could be compliant and completely unusable.
True.
Do you know what I mean? Like you can develop a compliant tool that's just not usable because of the model of training that you deliver, or because you know, it's so big that students aren't going to be able to follow it themselves and things like that. So I do like the way that the standards are. I know that Colleen on LinkedIn, she raised an issue about 1.4, and she was bringing out the fact that in the wording for valid, so validity under, you know, rules of evidence now says assessment evidence is adequate. And I totally agree with her that particular word, adequate, is problematic. Like what's adequate?
It opens up to auditors' individual opinion on what is adequate.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's one of the, that's one of those words where I was like, oh, okay. I mean, validity before was very clear. You covered everything in the unit of competency, like every part of that unit. And I mean, keeping in mind that following on from all of these new standards that are coming out, we've got a new training package framework, and the new training package framework is gonna bring in potentially a whole new structure of the unit where performance evidence and elements are being kicked out the door. Some of that sort of language is going to become quite interesting. So,
yeah. And have you reviewed all of the additional documents that came out with the standards? So the credential policy, standards policy, and then we've also got the compliance requirements. What are your thoughts on the guidance? Yeah. What are your thoughts on those guidance documents?
So look, we all knew the credential policy was going to remain the credential policy. So I think that's been, I mean, it's pretty much been in place since like March of last year. I actually see both sides of this argument. I understand the people turning around and saying you're watering down the requirements. You're allowing people back in who've only got their TAU 10. And so I can understand, the concerns. I also see the other side of it going, we've got a massive shortage of trainers in certain industries.
One of the things my thoughts on that one is trainers and assessors, I don't think you should have to do the qualification again, but I think it is very important that you are doing your vet PD and your industry PD.
That's right. But most trainers don't need to have ASS 502. They don't. The vast majority of trainers out there train and assess. They do not design training materials. And I understood it at the time. The thought process was, look, if they know how to write an assessment tool, they're going to know how to, deliver that assessment tool more completely. There's going to be less, pushback between trainers and developers. But the reality, unfortunately, was that the vast majority of that training was ticked and flicked. It was one of the saddest things. I ran several projects working in tandem with Mr. Wed, where, we contextualized all the training for construction trainers, or we contextualized all the training for hospitality trainers. We took them through the process of, but cheese and crackers, I had staff. I had my lead developer sitting with trainers for hours and hours on end to get them through this unit.
It's not their forte. It's not that's not their skill set. Their skill set is their industry.
Yeah. And the reality is that for many of those industries, they are not paperwork based people. They are focused on skills. Hands-on. So we're pushing people more and more. And I mean, look, don't get me wrong. Understanding paper, if you're going to be a trainer and assessor, you're going to have to do paperwork. You're going to have to understand legislation and compliance and things like that. But trying to push them into a developer box was an absolute nightmare. And I think that we do need to open it up because we do have a shortage in our industry, and we need to be, we need to allow for additional options. Because otherwise there's not enough trainers to build the skills that our country actually needs. We don't have enough construction trainers to get construction people out there so that we can build homes, which is, clearly a need for the country. So I think that, this is something that had to be done. Because
there was just too many barriers to entering the market as a trainer or assessor.
Yeah, exactly. And again, as long as you're doing your regular professional development, then I think that's fine. I think the industry requirement, again, there's people saying that it's been, watered down, and to some extent I can understand where they're coming from. But I also look at it and go, okay, but if you were a tradie for 20 years and then you moved into doing training, and you are still working on the tools with the kids on a daily basis, and you're going out into industry, and, you have a range of strategies in place. And I mean, in an ideal world, I think RTOs should be doing regular kind of competency checks. I've got an RTO that has, I think we've got about 30 auspice arrangements with teachers and schools. We bring those teachers out every single year. We get them back on the tools, and we actually have industry and our lead trainer do a currency, like almost do a VOC on them to go, right, do you understand? Like, are you still able to perform a weld, that doesn't look like shit?
Yeah.
So,
and that's very much what's in the new vet workforce requirements under quality area 3. So it is very much how are the trainers and assessors getting out of the classroom and really looking at applying those skills, and how are they keeping current with that? Because the big thing is that we need to bring them in to be able to teach these skills, and if they're not up to date, that's not going to help. I love the idea of the it's not an idea now. I love the experts, industry experts, and bringing experts in that whereby they don't have to hold the Cert 4 and training assessment, but they're industry experts where they can discuss their current skills and knowledge within the industry. I think that was a really good component to be brought in. So let's break down, so we've now got our 3 areas. We've already talked about outcome standards and the credential policy, and then we've got the compliance requirements, which I see as just our general compliance. So I don't think a lot has changed.
What did you think of Clause 6, previous conduct and involvement?
And that's around fit and proper person requirements. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's actually good, because we've actually had a lot of dodgy operators that were out there. And I've seen it where they've come to us where they've failed initial registration or re-registration, and I've looked at their audit report and I'm like, OMG, we don't want to work with you. But they really needed to be strict on those fit and proper persons, because it was bringing the industry down, those dodgy operators. And there are so many fantastic operators that are out there. So what are your thoughts on it?
Looking for support from fellow RTO superheroes? Join our free Facebook groups, the RTO Community and RTO Job Board. Connect, collaborate, and stay informed with people who get it. Just search RTO Community or visit vivacity.com.au to jump in.
I agree with you. I think that we know that during our little vet student loans era, I think we also know that there are plenty of RTOs that are very much related in reality, and yet for some reason on paper they've all got a different CEO and everything like that. I think that the best strategy for any RTO is to be very, very upfront about who you're connected with, and to be very careful as to who you're connected with. I think that this is going to be one of those areas where I'm just going to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So 6.2 and 6.3 and then 7, the vet regulator may have regard to whether a person has previously engaged in conduct that reasonably suggested a deliberate pattern of unethical behavior. The national vet regulator may have regard to any other matter relating to a previous person's conduct or involvement that the regulator considers relevant. The national vet regulator may have regard to whether the public is unlikely to have confidence in the person's suitability to be involved in an organization. So I think it's important for RTOs to understand it's very, very broad. I know that you and I have cultivated our connections and our networks and the people and the businesses that we work with very, very carefully over the years, specifically for this reason. My strong recommendation to any RTO owner is you have to cultivate your reputation in exactly the same way. And I think the only area where this is potential, it is quite open in its language. It's one of the few areas of the compliance requirements that's not black and white. All of the other components of the compliance requirements are black and white. So I think that this is something that we are seeing in ART play out a lot at the moment. And And I think that it's going to be something where there's probably going to be a little bit of a, pendulum swing each way before we kind of come to a happy. Well, actually, no, knowing that it's just going to swing from one side.
Yes, well, we had a case recently where someone came to us who had submitted an initial registration and they were not backed on so many things, but fit and proper person was one of the major areas. And I've already seen quite a bit of, with ASQA, they're really coming down on fit and proper person. Yeah, it's very much a focus. And this person came to us through a referral. And I looked at the audit report and I went, OMG. I was like, what had come up was she had lied on her fit and proper person. There was lots of dodgy stuff that was happening within the audit report, and she was blaming the consultant that she had been working with. So because this referral came through one of our partners, we thought, well, we'll give it a go and we'll go through further. And we gave her an opportunity. One of the big things was not only had she lied in her fit and proper person and didn't state that she had worked for other RTOs before, she didn't put that in there.
Really?
Yeah. And
like
apparently the consultant she worked with said that she shouldn't do that. She shouldn't put that in there. And I'm like, it all comes back to you and it'll come back and bite you. So, ASQA is not that hard for them to tie you together into any other audit report, particularly with AI now. They could just run the audit reports through and just go, have this person ever been in an RTO before? And then there was cases where the trainers and assessors had falsified documents. So we took it on face value and went, okay, yep, maybe you had a consultant who hadn't advised you correctly. Then we said, okay, this is an action plan. This is what you need to do. You need to find some new trainers to start with. We're not even going to take you on board unless you get some trainers who hold the qualifications. Well, we got that back this week, and the trainers, we once again found falsified information in the trainer and assessor files. And it's like, really, guys, we're not going to work with people like that. You have to be open and honest. And when it comes to fit and proper person, always be open and honest. They're going to find out. It's not that hard.
My person statement is literally 30 pages long now. I've got a 10-page supporting statement that goes onto it. And I'm like, here is a list of every RTO that I have worked with. Pretty much half of them, are either an intent to cancel or a rejection, or because that's how a lot of people come to us. They're preparing, so we've got a lot of RTOs like that. We've got a lot of RTOs where they contact us 2 years before registration and they're like, okay, we need to get our house in order and stuff like that. But, I've just finished doing most of the annual declarations. Most of my RTOs in our annual declarations, I put forward to them, I'm like, where it says, have you been compliant to every single standard throughout the whole year? I'm like, no, you haven't.
No.
And they're like, you can't say that. That's the truth. I'm like, I did a validation for you 3 weeks ago. We identified there was a non-compliance. We fixed the non-compliance, right? And now we're checking the other units in that same qualification. And they're like,
be honest.
I'm like, you need to be honest. I'm like, I'm not, when every annual declaration I've pretty much ever done for RTOs, I've basically been like, no, you have not been compliant against training and assessment for the whole year, because that is how the validation process works. That's, you can have compliant tools. You're still not going to have fully compliant assessments because your trainers are going to miss a question. They're going to mark a question satisfactory, that's not satisfactory. This is the process that we're constantly going through with RTOs, can you just be honest? Just be honest and be like, this is the situation. The consultant thing I think is really problematic. And I know that there are several consultants in our industry they will do an RTO registration without any client involvement. They write the TAS, they design the program, they put all of the policies together. And I
RTO
had one
in a
come
box.
across my desk. Yes, exactly. And, you know, like I do very, very few RTO registrations. I think for the purpose that, like, whenever anyone calls me up and goes, I want to start an RTO, my first response to them is like, why? Like, why would you want to do this? That's terrible. But then even when like they tell me why, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, well, I'll give you the templates for this, this, and this, but then you're going to sit with my staff and you're going to have to tell me how you're going to deliver the program, and you're going to write up the TAS, and you're going to write your trainer matrices, and, you know, you're going to sit with us for 8 hours and review every single policy and tell us how you need it contextualized. And I think when they look at us and like, I give them the whole workload, the vast majority of people are like, okay, that's cool. And I'm like, okay, go and get other quotes and see, you know, and then they'll go to somebody else and they'll be like, we'll take care of the whole process for you and you don't get to be involved. But then you get to audit, right?
Yep.
You get to audit. And then all of a sudden, the ASQA is asking you questions, because ASQA knows that, like, you know, this consultant and that consultant, they know their shit, right? And so yeah, I had one that came across my desk a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, oh, you know, we went with this consultant, and I'm reading the report, and I'm like it literally says in there, and fit and proper, again, that's what they were targeting. They were like, you're not fit and proper because we asked you questions about your policies and you clearly had no freaking idea what you were doing. Like, you had no understanding of the policy or the procedure. You know, you don't know how to run this RTO. You couldn't answer questions about the standards. So,
I did a podcast on this recently because this same client that came to us, they hired a consultant. She met with them twice in the whole initial registration process, received the policies and procedures the day before the audit. And for me, like, when we work with our initial registrations, we call them kickstarts. We do the same thing. We actually give them a roadmap of what the work is going to be involved, and we tell them how much time per week, like every week we're going to be meeting with you and we're going to go through these. We can't do everything for you because we're not going to be asked the questions. You are going to be asked the questions. And then we have 4 PDs that we do per month that teaches you how to comply with all of this. This person had never done any PD. We gave her some of our PD as complimentary because she absolutely knew nothing. And she was like, oh, wow, I actually didn't know all of this. I didn't know any of this. So the thing is, you've really got to be careful when you're engaging with a consultant. An RTO in a box is no good if you know nothing about RTOs. If you have experience and you've worked in RTOs and you've worked in compliance, then maybe buy an RTO in a box. But if you've never worked, like, normally our clients, our ideal client is they're an industry expert in their industry. We'll get you through registration. We're experts in compliance and we'll get you through, but you've got to do the work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly it. Like, I mean, if you're not progressing every week, I mean, even with our policy updates, our clients, they must hate me at the moment because, you know, like, every policy that comes out, we're like, okay, here's the policy. Here's the changes that we've made. Here's the relevant part of the standards. You need to review this, then you need to send it back to us, and then we're going to review it. And if you want to have a meeting, we're going to have a meeting about, like, we've been doing this now for months. Like, the quality registers that we've got with our clients at the moment, because we keep it all on Accelerate for each of them. Yeah. Like, the quality registers in the last, between January and now, you know, there's like probably 40 or 50 notes in the register of like, this has been sent out, this has been approved, this has been done, this has been done. And it's a massive process. We've also been working on through all of our documents, and it is a massive process to rewrite. And then what I've taken two ways of doing this. I've done one lot where I've rewritten and another lot where I've written from scratch, so that I can see what the difference is between those two.
So when these came out on Friday, I started straight away writing new policies and procedures against that. And it is quite a process, and I think a lot of people don't realise how much of a process it is. What are your thoughts on how existing RTOs are going to transition over to the new standards? Do you think they're going to stick their head in the sand, or?
I think you're going to have a variety. I think that I mean we have received a lot of calls from RTOs. We do a lot of work with Accelerate, so we've been receiving a lot of referrals from Accelerate on just being able to run some sessions with RTOs on like how to go and update using Accelerate's using Accelerate's mapping, right? Go in and map the policies and where do we keep them and how do we structure them and everything like that. So we've been running lots of those. So there are a lot of good RTOs out there that are doing the right thing. I have seen plenty of advertisements of like, buy our policy set and you'll be fully compliant. I know that there was, a new product that was launched yesterday that was, I'm not even going to say it, but like it AI and automates your entire compliance system and you don't need to do anything. Like, I'm just going to say it. If you're watching this podcast, if you are told that you can completely automate compliance using AI and you don't need to do anything, please don't waste your money. Please don't.
Because once again, you're the one that's going to be audited, not the AI bot.
Yeah. And look, policies are like assessment tools, like where people will buy them and chuck them into their system. And then they're like, they can't answer anything on them. And when you get audited on how you're applying your policies and procedures.
That's right.
And half the time,
they don't even know what the policy and procedure is.
The policy is from like 2018, do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
It should be a process for RTOs where you're actually reviewing what you do and does that line up with the standard.
Yeah. And I definitely use AI to help me with writing the policies and procedures, but I've trained a bot for 3 years now on how to be compliant, and I've got a clone bot of me, and it's got all of my knowledge in there, my webinars, my workshops, my documentation. It's got everything in there. So when I'm creating stuff, it's me. It's not any AI bot. And anybody who's writing policies and procedures from the free ChatGPT, OMG.
That's a lie. Like it will just outright lie to your face, and it can't cross-check. It can only cross-check so many documents and stuff like that. I mean, look, it's a brilliant tool. It is absolutely a brilliant tool, and it's created huge time savings for a lot of people. But you have to use it in the right way. It's like the internet, you have to use it in the right way.
Yeah, use your intelligence, use your knowledge, use your skills. I definitely do not use the first thing that's spat out. I'll refine. And it's like, okay, you've missed this bit. You now need to add this bit in. You need to expand on this. Oh, this one, you've got too much information. We don't need that. I see ChatGPT as my intern that knows a lot of information, but doesn't know how I want to put it together, although my bot has learnt a lot now. It's learnt a lot about how my structure is. I've even taught it how I want to structure policies and procedures. I love that ChatGPT now has projects, so I can just go to that project and work in there. Yeah, anyway, we could talk about AI all day, so let's move on. Okay, so do you believe that the new standards that we have, so the whole suite, have addressed the quality concerns that we've had in the training industry?
Welcome to the RTO Superhero Podcast, the show dedicated to empowering registered training organisations to navigate compliance effortlessly and deliver outstanding education. I'm your host, Angela Connell-Richards, CEO of Vivacity, where we believe that compliance should be a launchpad, not a limitation.
I think that the tools give the regulator the opportunity to address some of the issues that have been big quality concerns in industry. I don't think any legislative instrument is ever going to be able to be the be-all end-all fix for quality in our industry. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And one is just that with every industry, there's always a cat and mouse element of like people trying to find ways around it. And GPT is a good example of that. Like there are a lot of people, there are colleges that are using GPT to mass produce responses for their students. Like that's an entire market that's opened up now. And it has become a lot harder to be able to, for people that are doing this professionally, like they are professionally producing this fraudulent documentation for the students, they're getting good at it, right? So there's always going to be a cat and mouse element, I think, for all of this sort of stuff. What I think that the tools do is I think in particular areas, it provides clarity for the auditors to be able to go and strike those particular areas. Now, fit and proper is one of the areas that they're definitely attacking. I think validation under these new standards, with both reviewing the tools beforehand and the validation after the fact of the judgments, I think that's going to be an area where there's going to be a lot. I think online RTOs that don't provide any service to their students and just really all they're out there to do is to get that student onto that payment plan.
Yeah, here's your login and see you later.
I think that, the fact that they don't provide any wellbeing support, that they don't provide any support services for the students, that they don't monitor the progress of the students in any way, shape or form, I think it gives ASQA some tools to be able to address those particular points and very, very clearly. I'll be honest, I do have some concerns with how ASQA is operating in the PRIPOS sector at the moment. I have the biggest amount of respect for ASQA. I fully agree with them that PRIPOS needed to be tackled because there are some really bad players in that area and it does hurt Australia's national reputation. I think in the last 2 years, 90% of the chefs that have been qualified in Australia have been international. And that's, that's not a good thing. That's not how we should be building chefs in Australia. But I also, I do. And I think part of it is just the fact that there's only so many resources. And I'll be honest, federal pay rates for auditors are really not that great. People like you and I are not about to go and become an ASQA auditor because the pay just doesn't support it in any way, shape or form. And so what it does support is quite a lot of people coming into industry that are that just don't have that level of experience. And that can be really, really problematic. So I understand the challenges that the regulator is presented with in addressing the myriad of what they have to do, because you've also kind of got to be an expert in every area. I'm very fortunate that over the years, I'm very familiar with CPC, with RII, I probably have a really good breadth of knowledge across maybe 20 training packages. That being said, I think there's 100 training packages and ASQA kind of has to be across all of them. So, how you build a team that can do that is really, 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 really challenging.
And maintain consistency.
Yeah. So I think that's always going to be the challenge for the regulator in combating, in combating quality in our sector. I like the new annual declaration this year. I know this is a bit of an offshoot, but the questions in the annual declaration, I like the fact that they've kind of incorporated the quality indicator report into the annual declaration. I like the fact that they've specifically asked how many RPLs you've done as your numbers. And they're going to be able to cross-check your commencements, your completions, and your RPL with the AVETNES data that you've submitted. So I think that some of those sorts of things are quite useful. And they're also asking explicitly how many third-party agreements you had. And obviously you're going to put that number in, and that number should be the same as what's on your website.
ASQANet.
The same as what's on ASQANet.
Yeah.
So I think that some of those things are good. And I know that ASPA is trying to utilize AI and utilize tools to kind of, more accurately pinpoint where the risks are. They are also very, very much bedded down with some pretty major, when you look at the ASPA reports that have come out and you look at the number of matters that they've got in front of them and you look at the number of matters that they're facing in the ART, I think that I can definitely see at the moment that they're at kind of breaking point too. So, and that's always a really, really stressful time when the regulator is stressed for many of our providers that end up being stressed.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out over the next 12 months and more. Yeah. Okay, so for RTOs listening today, what's the first thing you think they need to do or they should do to prepare for compliance under these new standards?
Download them and read them. There's just so many to quote. Guys, look, okay, honestly, if you don't feel you have the time to actually sit and read the legal instruments, download the legal instrument, chuck it into a paid version of ChatGPT and ask it to give you the highlights, or chuck it into a program that's going to turn it into a podcast and listen to it while you're cooking or cleaning. There's so many mechanisms. Put it through Speak AI. It'll read the whole thing out to you while you're cooking dinner or something like that. But just start to familiarize yourself with the standards. There's my podcast. There's your podcast. I'm sure that Dan Hill from Spec Training will be putting stuff out.
And Phil Bevan's always got something to say.
Podcasts and just start listening to what are the changes in the standards so that you can familiarize yourself with them. And little things will start to come out and you'll go, oh, well, we don't have a well-being. We've got no strategy for tackling well-being. Or oh, well, we don't do any pre-validation. All of our validation is after the fact. Oh, well, we don't document that,
Yeah.
It's super easy to document stuff, guys. Jump onto Teams, add a Fireflies or a Read AI to it and just start talking with your team about all the compliance stuff that you're doing. Do it once a month. And then take those notes and chuck them into your quality register.
That's it.
You've got something there.
Then the other really important thing that I think we need to add in there is the practice guides from ASQA. So make sure you're downloading the practice guides with all of the policies that have come out. And reviewing that and identifying where are the gaps. And I think that's perfect listening to podcasts. I've got a whole heap of FAQ videos that I've released on our EduStream channel on YouTube, and it's just got little snippets. They're only less than a minute, and it just gives you an idea. Oh, are we doing that? Or do we need to do that? It just prompts it. So it should be just part of your ongoing just reviewing and things like that. And there's so much out there that you can access. What common mistakes do you predict RTOs will make in adapting to these changes? Thinking about previous legislation when it's come in and what people have done.
So I think the thing that I've learned throughout the years is to go through the standards, pick out those words that haven't got a definition, and define them. Right? Define them really clearly. So that you know what it looks like and so that you know how you're going to speak to it. And again, there are so many tools out there. The main thing that RTOs do all the time is they're doing the compliance, they're doing the tasks that meet the compliance, they're not documenting it.
They're not recording it, yeah.
Except for the fact that nowadays we've got Read AI, we've got Fireflies, we've got transcripts, we've got notes from everything. We've got so many different things that we can do.
Yeah, we've got phones.
Look at how you document stuff. Really do look at how you document stuff and figure out a way to make that easier. And if you've got Microsoft Zero, Accelerate, and you're using some of these AI tools, I really don't see how the system is set up so easily. The biggest change that we've made with all of our clients over the last year is we are able to document the compliance that's happening on a daily and weekly basis with our clients so much more easily than we were and than we ever have been able to in the past.
And thankfully, because we're doing all online now. Yeah. Because we're doing it all online. It was a bit different when we were doing it face-to-face, but we're doing it all online, and we're able to get all of this data from, and you can also use this data with your industry consultation, definitely with getting that feedback and things like that. I think one of the common mistakes that we will see is people trying to write their policies and procedures using AI bots and not having it. I think that's going to be a problem, and not contextualizing it for their RTO. And when they go to audit, that's going to be an issue. Same with, writing your training and assessment strategies as well. Like you can't just put something through your AI and expect it's going to come out compliant. I've got over 30 years of experience in the training sector, and I've learned a lot over those years. And I love ChatGPT. It's my favorite assistant ever. Yeah, but I would never ever take the first thing that comes out, even though I've trained it. So I think that's going to be a common mistake that we're going to see. I think also we're going to have people who are just going to go, I'll just wait till I have an audit. And I've seen this so many times where they go to audit and they ring us and go, help, we're going to audit and we don't know what we're doing.
Late at that point, buddy. Like, you're screwed at that point.
Yeah, don't wait until you get called up for an audit. You should be starting now. You should be, as you said, just download the documents, review it, put it through AI, get it to write a podcast for you. I love that. I think they're great ideas. And talk to your ChatGPT on your phone and get it to just ask it questions and then get it to answer, so that you're learning as much as you can. But I think, those mistakes, don't wait until you go to audit or getting called up for audit or re-registration, because ASQA can audit you at any given time. You could be on a focus area that they want to. Just because you've got through audit last year doesn't mean you're not going to have another audit this year. So you need to be on top of it. The other big thing, I think, because it's a big component, is training all of your team on the new requirements, making sure that everyone on the team understands the compliance requirements.
And records is going to be the biggest part of that. We're now, it's no longer 6 months. So we're going from 6 months to 2 years. We have to keep everything for longer. And so, I know that there are a lot of RTOs out there, probably not listening to this podcast, but, that will turn around and go, oh, we only need to keep things for 6 months. So therefore, every year it's like a, hurrah, let's, we're everything.
Let's burn it.
Yeah, pretty much. But you've got to keep everything for a minimum of 2 years now. So, and if you've got state funding contracts, up to 7 years.
Yeah, depending on your contract. Read your contracts.
Right? Yeah. So, that's, this is a good opportunity when we update the standards to do things like, okay, well, what funding contracts do you have? When was the last time you went and updated, in line with the WA business rules, or in line with the the PQS requirements for Queensland, or in line with the Smart and Skilled Operating Guidelines for New South Wales. So take it as an opportunity to go through and really review. There's new IRHR legislation that's come out in the last couple of years. There's been some major WHS updates across a lot of RTOs. Most RTOs haven't updated their policies and procedures in a while. There's not many aspects of the legislation that haven't changed. Cybersecurity, how you deal with data breaches, how you deal with a notifiable data breach incident,
privacy,
all of those sorts of things. Yeah, that's all of that needs to be in your policies now. So, and
the vet workforce, they're the major things I've seen is the vet workforce requirements, more around wellbeing, which I think is good. And also around the trainer and assessor requirements and maintaining, bringing in those experts, I think is also what's really good about it as well. Yeah. Okay, so we need to wrap this up. It was very insightful breakdown of what we've seen so far, and I love hearing what your thoughts are on this. So before we wrap up, Lauren, what's your number one piece of advice for RTOs looking at these new standards and are feeling overwhelmed?
Just don't stress out too much. Download a couple of podcasts, and every time you go to cook a meal or go for a drive, play one. Build your knowledge slowly over time, over the next couple of months, and you'll get there.
Yeah, great. That's great feedback. I think that's wonderful. All right, that's a wrap for today. In our episode, in this episode, we've covered a lot when it comes to the new standards. In our next episode, we're going deeper how these standards affect trainers and assessors and the practical steps for RTOs to implement changes. So don't miss it.
Thank you for listening to the RTO Superhero Podcast. Ready to transform your compliance process? Discover Comply Hub, Vivacity's AI-powered compliance management system, designed to streamline your operations and give you peace of mind. Visit our website to learn more and schedule your demo today.